Right. So this is where generally the insurance console from the Salesforce point of view, whatever I am showing you, this is on Salesforce. Salesforce, as you know, Salesforce is a CRM application. So in the CRM application of Salesforce, there are different products uh, which normally works on Salesforce. Either it can be CRM or finance and all. So one of the console we have is called insurance, wherein whatever the policy uh, creation, right? So creation of the policy documents. At the same time, if there is any kind of information relating to the primary groups, right? At the same time, primary members, right? So everything can be updated. Of course, whatever I'm showing you, this is a sample application which was predefined. Okay, this is not something which was created by me. This is a sample one which was already there, which I am showing you here. This is how generally this insurance console will be looks like in reference to the Salesforce application is concerned, wherein whatever the plans they have, for example, any quarterly plans they have, right? So these quarterly plans renewals, or else if there is any kind of branch units relating to the customer stuff, or the kind of insurance policies, whatever the insurance policy is followed by the information relating to the insurance policy, right? So who has taken the policy, what kind of policy that person has having, right? So when they have taken the insurance policy, effective date, right? So, and when will be the expiry date? Let's say, for example, this policy will be for 2 years time, for example, right? So 2 years is the time which this policy is going for the renewal part. At the same time, what kind of insurance policy it has, followed by the policy number. So all these information will be there in the policy center. So whatever I'm explaining you, this is from the context of the policy center point of view I'm talking about, not billing and insurance. Okay, do remember this is relating to the policy center part. But updation of records is not something being a business analyst we have to be focused on. Means whatever the new insurance policies if you want to create. So everything can be created over here. Here you can see there is an option of new. So wherein if you want to update any kind of new insurance policies and all, everything can be updated. This is all something from the entry purpose. But from the business analyst, we will be focusing more on the configuration part. Do remember, we are focusing on the configuration part, especially when we are working for a business analyst from the application point of view. Either it can be Guidewire, Duck Creek, Majesco, either it can be any of the healthcare applications, financial applications, any applications you see. We are the one which majorly focusing from the admin perspective, because being a business analyst, we will be focusing more on the admin roles. And I don't say that 100% admin roles will be managed by the business analyst, because whatever the required configurations we wants to make, this is where something which we have to be experienced with. Either it can be filters creation, or it can be workflows, or it can be changes in the user interface designs. This is where something which being a BA we have to be good with. And these rules and regulations and whatever the standard procedures do we require to follow remains constant for everyone. It never changes. For example, workflow creations or adding filters and all. For any application, the procedure will remain same. So if we are a business analyst working on the application in context to the insurance application, as an example, we are taking, especially in Guidewire applications and all. If you remember, in the previous sessions, I discussed about the data dictionary, data tables, etc. More we focus more on the configuration part. So whenever we wants to focus on the configuration part, we need to focus on the settings. That's what something you need to learn. So here you can see there is an option for settings where we have to do the setup, because assume that this was a Guidewire application. Assume that, okay, underline this point. Assume this was a Guidewire application where you want to make some changes in the existing application. Because I have repeatedly I have told you, Guidewire is an existing application which was already existed. It was there already. Now what we have to do, we have to make necessary changes in the existing application. That's what something which we have to be performed with. Means there is an existing application where according to the business rules and government mandates and all, we have to make some changes. Where do we require to make the changes? We don't do the changes in the developer console, because developer console completely focusing on the developer perspective, development perspective, so that we don't get into that. But the kind of services, whatever are we providing for the customer through this application, this is where generally we have to make some changes. That's the reason why we have to choose an option for service setup. Right, so this is where generally service setup is there, right? So here, in this service setup, whatever the changes we want to make, we have to make the changes here. Either it can be administration level, for example, user level, right? Let's say, for example, we wants to create some permissions for the people who are working on the application, because normally administrators are the people who will be having some. I'm explaining on a high level note today, so the detailed note I'll be explaining on one after another in coming days. So whatever the services setups and all everything, this is where generally business analyst we have to be focused more on from the context of permissions. For example, as an example I'm taking. Why permissions? Because permissions will be given for two different purposes. One is user permission, second is admin permission. User permissions will be given for the people who are using that respective application, irrespective of the kind of role what they are playing. But when it comes to the admin permissions and all everything, whatever the access and all everything comes under that category. That's the reason why here you can see there is an option for permission sets we have. So if you want to make any kind of changes in the permissions and all everything, here we have to make the permissions, whatever the required permissions we wants to make, right? So if we want to edit any kind of permissions or something like this is where something we have to be focused more on. For example, we want to make some edit on the permissions, right? So edit on the permissions part, edit, right? So here we have to make the changes, right? So if you want to make any kind of permissions for this particular application when we are doing this, this is where something we have to be focused on. Because configuration part, permission settings are one of the key and important element to be focused on. That is important. Because if you want to create any new permissions or if you want to edit any kind of permissions and all, this is where it is required. For example, you want to create a new view. Okay, permission settings and all, wherein we wants to create a new view, right? So for that, for a particular specific criteria, which we wants to create for the purpose of filters or something like that. For example, if you want to modify the data, right? So all these things, right? So for that purpose, generally these permission settings and all everything is what something being a business analyst we have to be focused on. Permissions I'm talking about, permissions from the access of the application. Okay, access of the application either will be categorized into two different parts. One is user permissions, second is admin permissions. User permissions, user are allowed to use the application and enter the data, wherein admin permissions will be given to the people who are is performing the administrative activities. So depends on the availability, depends on the kind of role which was given for the particular business situation. So there are changes wherein we have to make the permissions and all everything. So whatever the service setups and whatever the configurations are we making here, okay, this will be reflected on the actual application, whatever the new application, whatever the application you can see over here. So here, yeah, right. So whatever the application we are working on, here we can see the changes, reflecting of the changes and all everything happens. This is for the permissions point of view, because we are not focusing on complete administration part. I'm for being a business analyst, we have to focus on minimum things. One is permission settings is the minimum first one, point number one. Next, oath custom scopes means this is for authentication and authorization purposes, because oath is something will be used for authentication and authorization of the activities we are performing in the application. But oath 2.0 and all everything are not required for a BA, so that I am not going into that. But permission settings are important, point number one. Point number two, we need to focus on the user permissions. Users also required, whoever the users and all. If you want to create any kind of users for the existing application, or if you want to make any kind of editings on the existing application, for example, user integration of this particular user, wherein if you want to edit any information over here. So wherein we can go for editing and we can make subsequent changes and all everything here. Means if you are going to add any company name here, right? So or else if you want to create any kind of titles, or if you want to change any kind of mobile number, right? At the same time, it can be any employee number or any mailing address, right? So if you want to make any kind of changes in the existing application, subsequently we can make some changes in this. This is also one of the activity being a business analyst. When we are working on the application, we have to make. One is about the permissions. Permission sets is what something which we have to be focused on. And the second for the user permissions. So these are two from the user perspective. Do remember when we are making any configuration settings for any application, especially insurance applications, as in when I am showing you, two major two major changes we do from the user side. One is for the permission side and second is for the user side, but not both, because both is for verification and validation of the application. That will be required some consoles to be created by the administration team. They'll take care of that, right? So that we don't get into that. Next, one more option for queues, because for example, we wants to edit some data relating to the queue process of in backend database, right? So back office operations, whatever the back office operations are happening, right? So if you want to make any kind of changes in the existing back office, for example, you want to create labels. For example, it's not only back office, we need to create a label even for front offices and all. So why labels are we creating? Because labels we are creating for the better identification of the resources when you are accessing the application. Because there are lot of labels which we have to create. Because if you remember when I explained you about the Jira application, when we have created user stories and all, you remember whenever we have written the user story followed by providing some story points and all, you can see there are some labels were created by me, right? So labels are the one which are used for the easy identification when we are working on the application. So labels is what something which can be changed, and with this queue process of editing labels and all can be done. Either it can be back office or it can be front office or middle office, right? So these changes and all everything can be done. So queues, this varies again, back office as front office, middle office. This is all something which is depends on the structure of the organization, depends on the size and size structure of the organization, depends on depends on the organization to organization. Whatever the changes we wants to make from the users from the queues point of view will be varied. I don't say that this is remaining same for all the organizations, because some insurance companies are providing solutions and all everything in different parts of the country, and different parts of the countries even different parts, but some insurance services are confined only for a particular country, right? It may vary, because it may varies from a domestic service provider to international service provider. This is all will be varied, depends on that structure will also vary. So for that, this queues is also one of the key and important element. When we are working on the configuration part and all everything, we have to be focused more on. So from the administration point of view, being a business analyst, we have to focus on the permissions part. We need to focus on the user part. We need to focus on the queues part. So these are the three things from the user's perspective. Next, when it comes to the channels and all everything, this we don't make any changes, because email permissions or email settings, or if you want to make any kind of email templates, classic email templates and all, this is we never get into the email templates all that. Hence, I'm not explaining these channels and all everything. That's not something needed here. At the same time, omni-channel settings, if for example, if there is any kind of routing configurations when we are working on the networking part, because there are different firewalls, different networks which normally we use to configure and manage the applications across the organization, right? Multiple applications, some are on-premise, some are cloud applications. This is to be managed. For that purpose and all, routing configuration is required, so that how the data transformation we are transforming and how we are protecting the data protecting from the malware attacks and all, right? So for that purpose, generally this routing configurations and all everything is what something which we do. So this is all something from the omni-channel point of view, so that we don't require it. But when it comes to the platform point of view, this is where something which Visual Force, because this is from the context of Salesforce application, Visual Force Lightning and all everything. This is what something as a programming they write. But whereas when it comes to the guideware, the difference I am telling you, right, from the Visual Force and all, for Salesforce application, Visual Force is what something we use it. But whereas in guideware, we are using a programming for Gosu. These are the things because lightning experience and lightning programming is what something which we normally write for Visual Forces, all that for the Salesforce. But whereas for the guideware and all everything, we are using Gosu programming, right? So that's the reason that next process automation is important. This is important. For example, if you want to make any kind of changes in the assignment, right? For example, if you are creating any assignment rules and all, right? So this is where generally business rules are comes into picture. Again, these rules can be varied. These rules will be varied in three different ways. One is about the business rules, second project rules, third is a global rule. Three different rules we have. Because if you remember when I explained about Jira application, I have shown you. Right, so we have shown you, I have told you. One is about the business rules. Business rules are confined for particular organization, whatever the organization we are working on. Business rules are confined for a particular organization and whatever the rules and regulations they follow. At the same time, if it is project rules are confined for a particular project what we are working on. That is only confined for a particular project. Let's say there are few of the activities we are working on where any activities are performing, right? So if you are acting any activities we are performing, automatically once the activities is completed, that particular assignment has to be completed. This is all something comes under the project perspective. Next, when it comes to the global permissions and all everything, global permissions are different. Next, when it comes to the global permissions are different because global permissions are completely focusing on the external configuration of the applications or the servers, what we are working on. So case assignment rules also, being a business analyst, we have to be focused more on. So for that, we have to create a new case. Here you can see there is an option for new case where we have to create a rule, workflow rule name and all. I'm not creating, I'm just showing you. For example, workflow is what something which we are creating. For example, okay, case assignment rule. So workflow is what something, a rule which we are creating. And if you want to make any kind of changes in this flow process, right? So everything can be created and how this can be specified. All these things we have to make. If you want to make any kind of editing on the case assignment rules, all these things can be done accordingly, right? So that is where something where this case assignment rules and all everything are comes into picture. Next, auto response. Auto response means, for example, any queries were raised and all, whatever the responses are we providing through messaging, because auto responses are auto messaging system, whatever being a customer are we receiving. This is all something comes under the case auto responses rules. This is where generally we have to create a rule. For example, auto response. Right. So for example, I'm just giving some samples to you. That's it. Okay. Right. So auto response is one rule which I have created. So this also we do it. So when it comes to the process automation, because these process automations are useful to us to automate the process without having any human intervention all the time. Because for example, the case assignment or auto responses and all, these are the standard procedures. And how many applications we are running on, the process remains same. So what we have to do, we need to define some instructions to the system in such a way. So whenever we are giving some instructions to the system, automatically Without human intervention, the same process will be continued. That's the reason why, if you remember, there are some IT tools nowadays you can see. If you remember, because here I have to give some explanation for other things. For example, you might have heard about a concept called RPA. RPA stands for robotic process automation. Robotic process automation means, for example, if you want to perform an activity for a business activity in a particular domain or something, an application and all everything. So we can create a process or a workflow and we can automate it. There are different tools we use like UiPath, OpenSpan, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism. There are different tools where we can create and automate the process and we keep it ready. So once we have created an automated process, what happens automatically? Automatically whenever it is required and all, you can play it so that you don't require any kind of human intervention. So that if there is no human intervention and all, for the repetitive task, appointing some humans and paying salaries and all, everything will come down. System itself will perform all the activities. For example, the best example, 100% I am not relating to an extent. If you remember, if you understand simply, I can say, for example, you want to apply for a loan, or if you want to see how much loan are you eligible, all that. So there are some applications online you can see, right? So whenever if you are given some basic information of yours, right? So your name or your PAN card details or any other details and all, whenever you give, automatically it will show you whether you are eligible or not. If eligible, to what extent you are eligible. So there is an auto process which was already created and confined, which was already set up. So what you are doing is simply you are giving some information, whatever is required. So you are giving information. Automatically, system will give you the reply for that. This is where generally it comes under the auto response rules and all everything are comes into existence. So these are the different process automations which normally we have to make. So this also we have to be focused on. So it's not only about the user perspective. User perspective is one. Second, it comes to the platform from the context of customer code and all everything is required. Next, process automation. And one more important point about user interfaces. Because if you remember in the last, in the last session, if you remember, I'm about to explain you about the user interfaces, workflows and all, because after data dictionary, data models and all that, right? So metadata model, right? All that I have explained you.
Class.
I told that
Class.
it was done. The class recordings will be shared to you, right? So that was done already, right? So
కానీ నాకు తెలియట్లేదు వీలైనంత వరకు కనెక్ట్ చేస్తాను నాకు
Saujanya, can you mute yourself, please?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Right. So auto responses and all everything is what something which we have to provide here, right? So auto response rules and all that. So this user interface, yeah, coming to the user interfaces part, this is where user interfaces comes into picture. These user interfaces also we have to work on. So this is creating some objects, creating some fields, right? So creating some schema builders, at the same time creating user interfaces for the custom labels. Means if you want to create any kind of custom labels, sometime back I told you label creations and all. If you want to create any kind of new custom labels and all, so by providing some categories, providing some values. So this is also something which, being a business analyst, we have to focus on user interfaces and all. Next, reports and dashboards. If there is any reports and dashboard settings we wants to make, we have to enable and we have to disable the reports and dashboard settings also. This is also something which, being a business analyst, we have to make. And means we are not creating the dashboard in this regard, because there are predefined dashboards which were already enabled and created here. And depends on the requirement what we needed, what are the changes we wants to make and all everything we are doing over here. This is where generally this reporting dashboards, all these things are comes into existence. So in this regard, this user interfaces is what something which we have to be focused on. So user interfaces and how this user interfaces has to be changed is one of the key and important element But when it comes to the user interfaces, there is a change and there is a difference of settings or the instructions from the guideware application point of view are different, because guideware application point of view, whatever the settings we wants to make and all, everything will be as separate. That I will explain detailed to you, because user interface changes, user interface designs, configurations, and what are the settings to be followed to make any kind of changes in the user interfaces. These are all something essentially important for a BA that I will be explaining in coming days. Next one about data, because that's where generally I told you, right? So database models, data models, right? So all that, because if you remember in the last sessions, I have discussed all that. So that is where generally, if you want to export the data or if you want to load any kind of data and all everything, this is where it is required. So this data downloads or something like that. So if you want to create any kind of data input widgets, right? So all these things can be updated over here. So we don't see much importance in this application. In this application, we don't see the importance, but whereas when it comes to the guideware application, yes, database configuration or data models, creating different data models, these are something important. That's what the instructions and all everything I have given from the context of policy center already, that I have already explained to you. But major importance are user interfaces, workflows. So these are something which are essentially required being a BA whenever we want to make any kind of changes in the insurance applications, whenever you want to make. And this is not something you to update the policy document details, all that, because policy document details input to be provided of the customer data and everything will be done by the users. For a business analyst, whatever the backend changes to be made and all, that is where we focus more on, not on the application side, because these policy details changes. So those things we don't do it. The backend configuration part is what something being a BA we have to make some changes in the backend configuration part. This is where something which you have to be understood with from the configuration point, or something like this is what something which you have to know being a business analyst when we are working on the insurance applications. Is it clear, everyone?